Hi class, I'm recording this before our actual session because I'm not going to be able to be at our session at the appropriate time, but I wanted to record the highlights of some of these chapters that we've already gone through over the last 2 weeks. What I'm going to do is go over chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 and just hit the highlights of them. And then at your leisure, you can listen to the key points of each of the chapters, and maybe it might clarify some of the things that you've been reading in the chapter. So let me start this out, and then I'm going to send an email to everyone letting them know that they can listen to this recording, and maybe that's the way we'll handle it from this point on, since the participation hasn't been that great at our scheduled time. Maybe these recordings will just reinforce everything that is in the chapters that have been assigned for the weeks prior and for the weeks coming up. So let's get started. The first chapter that I wanted to go over is body ritual among the Narsimia. The key points really center around: an anthropologist presents observations of a culture less developed than his or her own and describes features of that civilization in the same manner as we describe cultures we view as primitive. The less developed culture is, of course, America. Now, the key points are: to understand other cultures, we must be able to stand back and view our own culture as others might. This is very important, to actually sit back and observe your own culture through the eyes of another culture. That really is a very eye-opening experience, and I think it has tremendous benefit. In describing some aspects of American culture, Narsimia, which is America spelled backwards, shows that to more advanced cultures, and by extension to future generations, our culture today may well be considered primitive. It is important to get away from the parochial view that one's own culture is right or normal or superior, and that other cultures are more inconsistent or strange or inferior to our own. We think of primitive cultures as practicing magic or having strange rituals, but rarely see these elements in our own culture. So, those are the things that we should be looking at in this particular chapter, and I think that as you read through this, looking at our culture through the eyes of someone else is very important. It's really very important in negotiating, because that is the way successful negotiators handle very sophisticated negotiations. They look at things through the eyes of their opponent or their adversary, and if they could see from their point of view, they can have a greater appreciation for what they're looking for and how it fits in with the negotiating process. So this is a very important part. Now, in looking at Chapter 7, Increasing Multicultural Understanding, our goals here are to help the individuals become aware of their own values. And you're asked to do an exercise in this particular chapter to show individuals or students how their culture programs them to react to and judge others in automatic or stereotypic ways. Also, to discover the types and sources of stereotypes about others, and to provide an opportunity for a participant to see how their stereotypes create barriers to appreciating individual differences. So as you do this particular exercise, keep these things in mind. I think it's a good exercise. It'll kind of shed some light on, undercovering stereotypes, and it'll be kind of fun to do. So I hope you had fun doing that. The next chapter, of course, talks about white privilege and male privilege. Our key points here is that the reluctance of males and whites to recognize that they have special earned privileges which give them advantages is examined in this article, in this particular chapter, that concludes with an extensive list of everyday, taken for granted white privileges. And it's kind of interesting when I read that, I felt that, wow, this, I didn't realize, that there were that many. Males and whites are taught not to recognize their privileges. They can admit that others are underprivileged, but can't see the corollary to this. Denial of males over privilege is seen in a variety of arguments males make against changing the academic curriculum to reduce male centrality and dominance. The author lists 46 special privileges that she and other whites take for granted. Daily privileges not enjoyed by non-whites. So that's really the focus of this particular chapter, and I think something to be mindful of as we continue on with our examination here of diversity. Now, the next chapter, the emotional connection of distinguishing differences and conflict, the key points here, it includes a discussion of diversity in organizations focusing on factors used in the treatment of difference and ways of addressing diversity. These include the positive aspects of differences and escalation of emotions into conflict. Emotions are introduced as a primary factor, leading to a choice for choosing conflict or valuing the difference as a matter of managing the interaction. Now, management of differences by avoidance. Excuse me. Avoidance techniques. These restrict associations to those with similar backgrounds, segregation of conflict in individuals. Repression techniques. They don't allow conflict to be resolved. They let all work together on this, etc. And they don't resolve things. They just stay the course. Appropriateness of avoidance and repression. This is useful for limiting considerations when deadlines are tight. A good interim strategy to buy time to make decisions. The danger of avoidance and repression. Strong resistance may develop. Groupthink may result. Overcompatibility. Stifling creativity and productivity may occur, and further conflict is likely. So these are things we need to look at when we look at differences by avoidance. Now, differences by conflict. Number one, the positive aspects, enriches perspectives and creativity, a way to test the strength of a position. Factors affecting individuals, treatment of differences, needs, wants, goals of the individual, the value placed on the relationship, experiences, and successes in interacting with dissimilar others. Differences evoke emotions varying in intensity. Intense or mild emotions can lead to conflict. Conflict is not a prerequisite for managing differences. So, conflict, can be a good thing. It can bring out the good, and it can bring out the bad points in a discussion. And so it's very important to have some sort of conflict within a discussion. But we can't allow conflict to take over and dominate the situation. Then we have a very unproductive type of situation occur. Now on chapter 10, the best of the best, when we talk about best practices, the key points here are Organizations need to be careful about implementing best diversity practices touted as successful by other organizations. You know, what works for one organization may not work for another. Best practices are evolving and may not fit another organization. No consensus about diversity and diversity management. Best practices are culturally dependent. Now, best practices may not be as successful as reported. Best practices are changes that need assessment and adjustment to work successfully. So, you know, it's a dynamic here, best practices. It's not something set in stone. It's not something that worked for one organization and necessarily will work for another organization. So it's something that is a dynamic process and needs to be treated as such. Now, the benefits of best practice are they stimulate creative thinking about change. They provide credibility for change efforts. They establish benchmarks, which is very important, and they set the foundation for change. Now, to prepare to establish a best practices environment, we need to clarify organizational context. We need to identify assumptions and motives. We need to search for alternative best practice options, and we need to develop new strategies suitable to the organization. So those are some of the things, you know, in this particular chapter that need to be noted, and I think it is important to understand the benefits and the shortfalls of best practices. Now, the last chapter here, chapter 11, the Pitney Bowes case, which really cites how Pitney Bowes employs diversity into their organization and how they do it successfully. It says Pitney Bowes is an organization with a history of diversity management dating back to the 1930s, when President Walter Wheeler encouraged the hiring, development, and promotion of women and racial minorities. Keep in mind, back in the 30s, this was almost unheard of, but it worked very well for them. Since a prime requirement of successful diversity management is support from the top of the organization, the contributions of three CEOs, Walter Wheeler, George Harvey, and Michael Curtilli, are detailed in the case. At Pitney Bowes, diversity is considered to be a competitive advantage that permeates the way that business is conducted and employees are managed. Each business unit produces an annual strategy plan that is derived from corporate goals, and this must include diversity. To recruit and retain the best diverse employees, Pitney Bowes has formed a partnership and made alliances within the diverse community. As a result of involvement with organizations such as the National Urban League and the Society of Women Engineers, the corporation has become an employer of choice for qualified minorities and women. These efforts are supported by integrating diversity into core management functions, developing flexible benefit programs, and utilizing open communication systems. Corporate management at Pitney Bowes is acutely aware that managing diversity as an operational value and competitive advantage will be an ongoing challenge in the future. The organization has developed a business strategy that is focused on growth through diversification and global expansion. So Pitney Bowes seems to be a pioneer in the area of diversity and, you know, incorporating minorities and women into their workforce, and it seems to have been very successful. So those, in essence, are the highlights of these chapters, and I just wanted to point out some of these areas as you go along in your reading, and I'll be, you know, doing another recording here next week going over the next few chapters, just to give you a feel for the importance of what's in each chapter and the things to look out for. So enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you next week. I'll be emailing you right after this recording. So take care. Bye.